And welcome to coverage of our top 8 here at Grand Prix Portland. This is a quarterfinal matchup between Christoffer Larsen and Michael Bernat. I'm Matt Sperling. Paul Rizzo sitting here on my left. Players shake hands. They're ready to go. We're going to see a 4-color energy versus Ramunap red elimination match.
Yeah, and just updating something from earlier, Christoffer has 2 removal spells that he can play early in the game. He's 4 copies of Harness Lightning and 4 copies of Fatal Push, and those are really going to be the spells that he's going to try to use to control the board early, prevent Michael from expanding a board presence and overwhelming him before his more powerful late-game spells can take over.
So a card that you'll see in almost every energy deck that you won't see in Christoffer's is Long Tusk Cub. What you will see is Glint Sleeve Siphoner, which gets cast on turn 2, and Michael has a shock. Being on the draw, you love to see a 2-drop you can shock, right?
Yeah, that's the best use of shock you're going to see, and again, it's the board presence. Michael, the first person to stick a creature now.
Kari Zev is that creature, so wow, Whirler Virtuoso, one of those really important cards in the matchup. We've talked about how Ramunap Red has creatures that have Menace. Well, one of them's right there, Kari Zev. Menace requires 2 blockers. The Whirler Virtuoso, even though it's only 1 card, it makes 2 blockers. So certainly, I think 2-drop, 3-drop, and that particular 3-drop, Christoffer's coming out the gate in a way that I suspect he's happy with.
Yeah, Whirler Virtuoso, really the critical card in the matchup, and until he's able to get something like Vraska Relic Seeker online, the Whirler Virtuoso is going to be able to make a constant stream of blockers, and blocking is what he wants to be doing. He does not want to take a bunch of damage and allow the burn spells, the Hazarets, and the Ramunap Ruins from Michael Bernat to finish him off.
Christoffer Larsen grabbed the monkey and put the monkey on. Like he couldn't block that thing fast enough. So this is not the first time he's played this matchup. He understands what his game plan is. He just wants to soak up that 2 damage, and if it turns a shock into a removal spell, so be it. Instead, it's Rampaging Ferocity. Because that triggers whenever a creature comes into play. In response, Christoffer's going to make that Thopter.
We see looks like no 4th land, importantly, here for Christoffer.
Wow. So you said it. There's no 4th land, and so a number of high casting cost cards in Chris's hand. He has not gotten closer to casting them this turn. He's added a 2nd Whirler Virtuoso to the board, helping to shore up his defense for the moment. So he'll be looking to buy some time, but he's going to need to do so since he doesn't have his 4th land yet. Meanwhile, on Michael Bernat's side of the table, what do you think is going to be important here going forward for him?
Yeah, well, so he wants to make some sort of an attack right here. I think that how quickly Christoffer put that Whirler Virtuoso in front of that monkey maybe indicates that Christoffer would consider a triple block on Rampaging Ferocity. So he's to think to himself, okay, if I attack with the Ferocity, is he going to triple block? Do I have anything to stop that? And if not, maybe just consider just continuing to build up your board.
Okay, so combat not obvious at this point. We'll see what Michael Bernat decides to do. Starts with Sunscorched Desert. Chris drops to 16. We know every life point matters in this matchup, as it always does against Ramunap Red. Looks like Earthshaker Kenra here, which prevents the triple block that you mentioned. So that probably increases the likelihood that the Ferocity attacks, but we'll see what Michael decides to do.
Well, yeah, it's certainly going to allow the Kari Zev to attack because now there's no good double block on the Kari Zev. The question here is, does the Rampaging Ferocity attack? Remember, Christoffer still has the 3 energy. However, the Ether Hub is his only source of red mana right now, so there's a lot for Christoffer to think of. But Michael's just going to go for the throat.
When in doubt. I mean, if you brought a red deck to the tournament, right? If all else being equal, let's just turn all your creatures out. And so he didn't find a persuasive enough reason not to attack with everything, and there you see him send it all in.
And it would be tempting if you're Christoffer to want to try to make a block that gets the Rampaging Ferocity off the board, but a double block here runs into a potentially blowout Lightning Strike or a Braid. And at this point, the players have exchanged deck lists now with the tournament being in the top 8 portion, so Christoffer will have known that Michael has access to 2 main deck of Braids and 4 main deck Lightning Strikes. So he opts for a more conservative block, and it's hard to fault him there.
So that block does mean that a significant amount of damage is heading right to Christoffer's face. And Christoffer, a player that's now dropping to 10 life and who hasn't yet found his 4th land. He can't be feeling great. Having said that, he does have 3 creatures on the board, on the battlefield, and the ability to make a 4th.
Yeah, and this would be an amazing turn for him to find that untapped 4th land, as he has a Harness Lightning for the Rampaging Ferocidon and a Servant of the Conduit, which will allow him to then accelerate the next turn into Vraska Relic Seeker. So he would love to find an untapped 4th mana here.
Justin Perkins, Jeffrey Thompson, Joseph Burnett,
but before he gets a chance to do so, Michael's back in his 2nd main phase, and he's going to use Shock to finish off that Whirler Virtuoso, and that does so. Some efficient use of mana here on Michael's side. He's been able to do a couple things this turn, keep the pressure on.
Yep. So we see that a double block of 2 creatures on the Rampaging Ferocidon would not have worked out for Christoffer, but if he had made another Thopter and triple blocked, he would have been able to take out the Ferocidon. Hard to fault him for playing around a Braid and Lightning Strike. I actually like the way he played it.
Wow, so Christoffer, looking for a 4th land, instead finds a 3rd Whirler Virtuoso. He's drawn as many Whirler Virtuosos as lands this game, and he's going to choose, possibly because of the Ferocidon, he's going to choose to use removal this turn as opposed to that 3rd Whirler Virtuoso.
Yeah, and he's just praying for no Hazoret, right? You're sitting there and you're thinking, all right, come on, man, just give me a break for 1 turn.
Yeah.
Wow. 3rd Sunscorched Desert, and he has the Ramunap Ruins in play, so that's a lot of virtual damage he's representing.
Yeah, you start the game, maybe you're only at 15 life. You missed your 4th land drop a couple times. It's an uphill climb.
Mm-hmm. We don't know what Michael still has in hand, but certainly if he had a copy of Hazoret the Fervent, he would have slammed it down already.
Yeah, a card like Hazoret or Glorybringer, all of a sudden things start to look really bleak. But as it stands, after this Harness Lightning takes out the Ferocidon, Michael is left with just a Karizev.
Mm-hmm.
So now Chris is not fully stabilized until he's, and Michael does say go, and there's the 4th land. So how big a swing was that?
Yeah, a huge swing. I mean, obviously, Christoffer not out of the woods yet, and his life total is being pressured heavily, but this is going to allow him to continue to start to apply his game plan, and he's going to need to turn the corner, a phrase that we've mentioned many times this weekend, very quickly before Michael's direct damage and Ramunap Ruins can finish him off.
He starts things off with Servant of the Conduit. That's going to give him 2 more energy, and crucially, another permanent that can make mana next turn. You see Vraska in Chris's hand. That might be part of his long-term game plan. And Michael Bernat does nothing on his turn, says go, and does nothing on Christoffer's turn.
Curious as to what he has here.
A 6th land means that Eternalize can happen now. The Earthshaker Kenra comes in. It's a 4/4. He can make any creature on the other side of the battlefield at this point not be able to block this turn. It's Whirler Virtuoso that's selected, so that won't be blocking this turn, and we may see an attack.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a big attack. I'd be very surprised if Michael didn't send both of his creatures into the red zone. Michael just wants to be very careful here. I mean, once the top 8 happens, these players, it's a very serious moment. Now there's a lot of money on the line, and it's all fun and games, but now the weight of the moment kind of sinks in a little bit, and the players just want to be uber careful.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of this style of play where you play at a fast pace, in the routine turns, then maybe you slow down for a little bit when it's time to figure out exactly what to attack with on a key turn. These players have been playing at a fast pace, and now this is a really important turn. What Michael lands on is attack with everything. Create the monkey token. Chris creates a Thopter token in turn, and then thinks about how he's going to block. Remember that the Whirler Virtuoso cannot block this turn.
Yeah. So the reason why Karizev is able to attack this turn is a quadruple block with Servant of the Conduit and 2 Thopter, or triple block, excuse me, is just not feasible. It would take too much damage. So I think that Michael identifies that and makes a really good attack.
The Thopters end up chump blocking to preserve Chris's life total. He still takes 1 from the Karizev and falls to 8. The draw step brings a second serve into the conduit. The Whirler Virtuoso
that looks like it should go down from 2 to 0, then back up to 3, right? Seems like the energy total might be off there.
So Servant brought us up to 2.
Then you'd have to use the Servant in the Ether Hub to go down to 0 and then back up to 3 from Whirler. So it doesn't sound like, seems like the energy total might be off on Christoffer Larsen. Let's see if we can get that fixed.
Looks like play may have stopped momentarily, so they may be trying to. Hopefully, they're trying to sort that out so they get that right. Not sure. That or Michael's just thinking.
Or I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, it's either 4 or 5 energy, so not. It's certainly a difference that matters, given that making a Thopter and being able to use both servants is something that Chris would like to do. Maybe there was an extra energy hanging out there after the last turn.
Never know.
Yeah.
Obviously, here in the booth, we're not able to hear the communication down there at the table, and so it could be that the player shortcutted through some sort of a tapping of the mana that we're not aware of.
All right, so if Chris is going to win this game, that's a big moment. Michael just says go. He's got Ramunap Ruins. He's got a total of 5 deserts in place. So he's got enough damage on board to finish this. Chris has to find a way to not give him enough time to finish this game.
Yeah, so, and this is the really important thing we mentioned in the pregame about Vraska's Contempt. Christoffer Larsen has no other way besides Vraska's Contempt to gain life. So that Ramunap Ruins represents a pretty clean, 4 activations and you're dead. And not to mention, Michael is still able to draw something like a Lightning Strike or a Chandra Torch of Defiance, which can accelerate the clock.
So Vraska is going to ultimate how soon? Right, you see Vraska go to 8. Next turn, Vraska can go to 10. And the following turn, Vraska could set Michael's life total to 1. Mm-hmm. That is technically faster than what's on board with the Ramunap Ruins.
That's right.
So if you're just looking at the board, if nobody was ever allowed to cast another spell, Christoffer would win this game. But it doesn't take much to get an extra damage or 2 in.
Sure.
So that's what it'll be interesting to see if Michael can find that extra 2 or 3 damage.
1 shock, 1 lightning strike.
Oh, and you mentioned a shock and a lightning strike. Okay, how about 2 lightning strikes?
2 lightning strikes.
Wow. So there it is. Michael Bernat able to kind of hang in there with just before the Vraska was able to ultimate, deal the final 6 points and end up a game. You can see the difficulty in this matchup for Chris Larsen. He did miss land drops, but at the same time, even when you take control, you can still lose the game in this matchup.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. It's just really difficult. His deck, again, game 1 at least, is really, it's almost pre-sideboarded against other teamer decks. It's not as well equipped to handle the Ramunap red strategy, so he's going to want to go to his sideboard to make sure that he has the right configuration here. So
there's Michael. Is that a Jacoby Brissett jersey?
I don't know. I'm actually not sure. Could be Andrew Luck. Could be Peyton, actually.
I think it's Andrew Luck. All right, so as we look at the sideboards, first with Michael Bernat, who's on screen, he's playing against a deck that he probably doesn't have a ton of familiarity with. And it is different when you're playing against a deck that doesn't have things like Long Tusk Cub. So perhaps a different sideboard plan for him.
Yeah, I think, Harsh Mentor is a card that we've mentioned a few times. People have differing opinions on how effective that is. Certainly really good against Whirler Virtuoso. It's pretty good against the Scarab God. We may see him use that card. Glorybringer is something I certainly think that we're going to see. And then Chandra Torch of Defiance, you can take it or leave it. On the play, you're always going to want Chandra Torch of Defiance. It's so strong on the play. On the draw, sometimes it can fall behind Whirler Virtuosos. I think that we're going to probably see him bring in Chandra Torch of Defiance, but is not as powerful being going second.
A card like Shock, do you expect that to come right out?
It's tough. I think against a normal team or energy strategy on the play, I would. Christoffer has quite a few different shock targets, and we see 3 Death Gorge Scavengers in Chris Larsen's sideboard. So Shock a little more attractive than it would normally be.
Yeah, you can see the deck list right in front of Michael. So what he's got in front of him, he's staring at, for one thing, 3 copies of Death Gorge Scavenger in his opponent's deck. Yeah, that makes sense to me that Shock might be, you could have 1 mana up, the opponent drops what they think is a pretty powerful creature, and it's gone. So we may actually see shock stay in. So keep an eye on that. That'll be interesting. It's not obvious to me which of these Ramunap red cards are actually particularly bad. Everything kind of is useful in different contexts. So it'll be tough for Michael to figure out which tools to use. Chris, on the other hand, he probably knows which cards are useful and which cards are less useful. He's got a lot of expensive cards in his main deck. He's got some cards in his sideboard that are clearly good. Vraska's Contempt, Deathgorge Scavenger that we mentioned. What about a card like Duress?
I don't like Duress in the post-sideboard matchups. Duress is good against control decks with really, really powerful late games and combination decks where they need to put a specific group of cards together. Duress here is going to catch maybe a Burn Spell, maybe a Chandra Torch of Defiance, but it's going to be too bad of a top deck in a lot of situations. I think, as you mentioned, yeah, the Deathgorge Scavengers, the one Vraska's Contempt, we're certainly going to see from Chris Larson. I think he'll probably, obviously add the Chandra's Defeats and shave some of the more expensive cards in his deck. The one card I'm curious about, I'm interested in, is the Hour of Devastation. Hour of Devastation is a card that we haven't seen too frequently come up in Standard. We saw it a little bit during some ramp decks a few Pro Tours ago, but kind of a nice clean answer to things like Chandra, things like Hazoret. I wouldn't be surprised to see Chris utilize that card at all.
All right, so players shuffle up. Chris gets to be on the play again, and what he'll be looking to do is make all of his land drops. That game, if that Vraska had come out a few turns earlier, perhaps the ending would have been a little bit different. Yeah,
and again, board presence. Board presence is the key to Standard. It's been the key to Standard for about the last year. And in that situation, it got to a board situation very quickly where Chris was unfortunately forced to make chump blocks rather than productive double blocks against Michael's onslaught. Michael was very happy to eternalize the Earthshaker Kenra and then force Chris into chump blocking, and he wasn't able to turn the corner fast enough to beat the direct damage.
Michael even a little bit flooded that game. Of course, when you get flooded with the Ramunap red deck, that often means your opponent is taking 6 straight damage from your lands. That's what we saw.
Yeah, these aggressive or burn or red deck strategies have fallen in and out of favor in Standard since the beginning of time, since it was called Type 2, right? And when they've been at their best is when they mulligan well and when they have great flood mitigation. And Hazoret and Ramunap Ruins, respectively, are two of the best cards ever printed in terms of mulliganing well and mitigating flood. And so we see Ramunap Ruins has been kind of a staple of the top tier of Standard for some time now and will remain for the foreseeable future.
Chris looks his opener over. I think he's happy with it. I believe I see a green source and an Attune. That's usually, that ought to be enough.
Botanical Sanctum, Attune, every energy player's dream.
Both players have kept 7 cards. About to be underway here in Game 2 of our quarterfinal matchup between Chris Larson and Michael Bernat. A one drop that you often see here is Bernat Courier. Not this game, and I wonder if those were still in the deck. I mean, something's got to give in this list. So I'm watching with a careful eye, trying to figure out, okay, which cards did Michael decide not to use? Bernat Courier might be one of them, unclear.
Yeah, Bernat Courier and Carry Zeb, the Skyship Raider, are cards that are very frequently cut or shaved when you're on the draw against energy strategies. Could also see occasionally people take out some number of Earthshaker Kenra. I don't think Chris is the kind of deck where I'd want to take out any Earthshaker Kenras. He doesn't have the long tusk cub that Earthshaker Kenra is so weak against.
So Chris, I haven't seen his hand, but the way he's played his mana out, indicating a fatal push, right? He chose to lead with the Dragon's Skull Scummet and use turn 2 on Attune, leaving him with an untapped black source. Why would he do that? Well, one reason is fatal push. Doesn't mean it necessarily has one, but maybe it's something that's at the top of Michael's mind. We'll see how this plays out. Kari Zev, no fatal push, so there's one off the top, however. Instead, it's going to be another energy staple. That's Rogue Refiner. There's 2 energy in a draw. You mentioned the board presence, and we've seen, you know, a lot of numbers get tweaked in the energy decks. Rogue Refiner doesn't seem to be one of the cards that's negotiable.
No, I mean, actually, occasionally you could see one shaved, but only when you're on the draw. On the play, it's too just objectively powerful. But Michael's got to be pretty happy about the way this early game has developed. He's able to untap and start one of his turns with one of his key creatures and get to attack with it, and Christoffer is faced with no good blocks. So if Michael can continue applying pressure and judiciously either use his removal or turn it into direct damage, he can just continue to do the thing that Ramunap Red wants to do the most.
Michael doesn't play anything during his turn, so he may be setting up to do something on Chris's turn, or he's stumbling a little bit. We'll have to see. Rogue Refiner ties the score at 17 life apiece. Now Chris plays a Whirler Virtuoso. In response to the energy trigger, Michael's going to abrade it. 3 energy will get used to create a Thopter, and then the 3 energy, that trigger will finally resolve. So even though the energy counter didn't move, 3 energy got spent, then 3 energy got re-added. Chris ends up with 1 Thopter.
Yeah, players just shortcutting through that.
There's the Fatal Push. So that gives Chris a decent amount of breathing room, but Michael's got some powerful 4-mana spells in his deck, so I wonder if one of those might show up.
Yeah, but notably, neither Hazoret nor Chandra too brutal at this point in the game. Now it's Chris that has the board presence. Drawing that Fatal Push was a huge draw step, allowing him to efficiently use his mana and clear Michael of his board presence. So Hazoret comes down, but Michael not able to put it into combat quite yet.
So it is Hazoret. It can't attack or block this turn. Michael will be looking to empty his hand as soon as he can to get that Hazoret into the red zone. Wow. Big turn here from Chris. It's Deathgorge Scavenger. It's going to gain 2 life. Servant of the Conduit adds another creature to the board.
And what's so great about Deathgorge Scavenger here is that it really prevents Michael from being able to pivot onto the offense with his Hazoret, right? You don't want to race 5, 8, 9 power of attackers plus potential life gain. So Michael is going to need to work on picking off parts of Chris's board before he can, you know, kind of pivot to attacking with his Hazoret.
And we've seen the Ramunap Red deck have to turn to defense and win many games, but those games tend to not be the ones where the opponent's at 18 life, right? Chris did a great job early on using what he had, including that Fatal Push that you mentioned, to keep that life total nice and healthy at 18. So Michael needs to find a way to get back on the front foot because there's no way to win a game defensively with an opponent at 18.
And every draw step that you give Chris is another opportunity for him to draw one of his 3 Vraska's Contempts.
Well, Lightning Strike will knock out the Scavenger, so that's not going to be a problem on a recurring basis. So that's a good start. What Chris is left with is not all that impressive, just a couple of 3-2s and a 2-2, you know, a 3-2, a 2-2, and a 1-1. However, Michael appears to be out of gas.
I think Michael's just in a situation where I believe he has 2 cards in his hand. He could have pitched one of them and attacked with the Hazoret and threatened to bring Christoffer down to 11, but then he would have taken 6 back himself down to 7. That's just a race that he was setting up to lose.
There's Vraska. So if she comes in, starts at 6 counters. Every time you plus Vraska, 2 more counters and a 2-2 Menace Pirate. If you minus 10 Vraska, you can set any player's life total to 1. So it doesn't take that many turns for that to finish the game, but it's good defensively. And for Chris, it means he's got so many resources on the board. He's at 18 life. He's in great shape.
Yeah, Chris is in the driver's seat here, and Michael's deck, and indeed no Ramunap Ruin decks, really has the tools to handle this overwhelming of a board advantage. So Michael's going to shock Christoffer down to 16, but there's some work to be done here. Glorybringer, probably the best thing that he could add to the board at this point, but might not be enough. How frequently this weekend have we said that? Glorybringer, probably the best thing you could add to this particular board.
Yeah, there's a reason that's such a popular card.
Yeah.
But at this point, I think you could spot Michael at Glorybringer. I'm still picking Christoffer.
Well, the good news about Glorybringer is this, right? It could exert to kill the Thopter, bring the Vraska down to 4 counters, and then the Vraska might at some point need to minus to kill the Glorybringer. So,
all right, well, hey, we're going to find out. We were talking about it not knowing whether Glorybringer would come, and sure enough, here it is. So Glorybringer can exert to kill any of the creatures that Chris has. Michael has to decide, am I going for the life total and ignoring Vraska, or am I going to try to knock that Vraska down? What would you do here? What would you attack?
I just can't see how he's going to deal 16 damage before that Vraska pops off for ultimate, so I think I'd be tempted to at least have the Glorybringer go at the Vraska. And certainly we'll see Michael exert to kill the Thopter here.
Yeah, perhaps one of the value of attacking with both on the Vraska is you kind of force a chump block.
Sure.
So there's the exert. Not yet perfectly clear what is being attacked. Well, let's start with that exert trigger. Maybe then we'll get an indication where these creatures are headed. Well, you see an immediate chump block and a life total adjustment, so those were headed right for the face.
Okay, wow. Michael's saying, I think I can win this game in a few turns.
So Chris falls to 12. Now with that Vraska, he's now put to the test. Do I want to go up to 10 and threaten something, or do I want to just knock out the Glorybringer right now?
Well, I think this turn he's going to go to 10 because the Glorybringer is exerted, so he can postpone the decision on what to do about Glorybringer for a turn. I think having the Manus creature out and also continuing to threaten, as you mentioned, the ultimate for Vraska is the way to go.
In Chris's hand, there's a couple more creatures, and we'll start with the Vraska, like you mentioned. There's no rush on the Glorybringer; it's exerted for now. And the Scarab God is an option. Wow, look at that! So, with enough creatures to chump block Hazoret, the attack for 3, and that attack is actually pretty. It sends Michael all the way down to 10. The Scarab God adds 5 more power to Chris's board. So now Michael's got to figure out, how do I deal with this Vraska? How do I finish off my opponent from 12? How do I not just die along the way at 10? So he's still kind of between a rock and a hard place. We'll see what he draws.
And even if you were to deal with the Vraska and not die to that ultimate, there's a Whirler Virtuoso waiting in Christoffer Larsen's graveyard for the Scarab God to reanimate. So a lot of problems here for Michael Burnett. I think we might be pretty close to heading to Game 3.
So does Michael Bernat have access to Harsh Mentor, a card that we saw some of the other Ramunap Red players using?
He does. He does have 2 Harsh Mentors in the sideboard. We don't know if he's chosen to bring them in for the matchup. As you mentioned, the Christoffer Larsen's strategy is so unorthodox, nothing like a bristling Hydra or anything of that nature. It's really Whirler Virtuoso and Scarab God that Harsh Mentor is effective against.
So you see Hazoret's ability activated, discarding another Hazoret. The 2 damage redirected to Vraska in order to prevent the ultimate. And now Michael deciding whether there's any sense in attacking or whether the Hazoret has to stay back.
Michael is going to be Michael's going to be dead on board if Christoffer draws a land, because he'll be able to reanimate Michael's Hazoret and then play one of the 2 cards in his hand to get down to 1 card in hand. So,
well, he's got a Servant of the Conduit out, but does he need that attacker?
He does, because the Hazoret would only be a 4 power, so that'd be threatening 9. Oh, the Scavenger Grounds. Okay, so I'm just noticing now the Scavenger Grounds at the top of Michael Burnett's battlefield. It's hiding over there on the other end of its lanes. It's just sneakily over there.
All right, so Vraska goes down this turn in order to knock out the Glorybringer. That indicates that Chris does not see a lethal attack.
Or that he's going to be getting Glorybringer for his own.
Oh, fair point. Scavenger Grounds, we suspect, might have something to say about that, but we'll see.
But, I mean, Christoffer would love that, right? If Michael has to spend his mana, sacrifice on land to go down to 5, just to exile the graveyards, I think he'd be pretty happy with that. There's a lot of different options for the way that Christoffer can play this turn. I don't think any of them end in a losing situation.
Actually, interestingly, the treasure that Vraska makes means that if Christoffer just wants to, he could actually respond to the scavenger grounds by using the Scarab God again. So, anyways, there's any way you slice it.
Yeah.
Christoffer clearly in the driver's seat, and Michael perhaps starting to think about Game 3 and how to be configured on the play. Something like Harsh Mentor might be an effective tool. Who knows? But this one slipping out of his reach.
Still not sure. I'm thinking about the decision to aggressively go after Christoffer's life total instead of trying to fight the Vraska earlier in the game. And I don't have a strong opinion. I'd have to review kind of review the film to see what was the right approach.
I mean, I don't know what was right, but it certainly wouldn't have mattered, right? You could rip that Vraska up and put Chris at 16. It seems like the outcome is the same.
Well, the Vraska did take out the Glorybringer as well, and has taken out the Glorybringer, has made a chump blocker, and has created the Pyro that's been attacking. So it's had an outsized impact on this contest.
All right, Michael surveys it, doesn't see a way out, so we will be heading to Game 3, the first of our quarterfinal matches. If you're just joining us, I want to quickly reset the rest of the top 8. So you see these 2 decks here. You've got 6 other decks. One of those decks is a electrostatic pummeler, kind of the pump and double up energy deck. The other 5 are Teamer Energy or Ramunap Red. So we've got a mix of those decks. This is a matchup between our 1 and 8 seed. Christoffer Larsen with that four color energy deck kind of ripped through the Swiss, but I don't think he's faced. We haven't seen him on camera face a deck that's as tough a matchup as this Ramunap Red deck is. And being on the draw in Game 3, he's really going to be up against it. So we have an update for you elsewhere in the bracket. Brandon 2-0, the winner over Alex Wilson. So Brandon Go, who's another Ramunap Red player, I believe, he advances to our semifinals and awaits the winner of the matchup that you're watching.
Yeah, and he defeated Alex Wilson playing Teamer Energy. In theory, the bad matchup for Ramunap Red. We saw Brandon beat Teamer Energy to get into the top 8. Now he's beaten it in the quarterfinals. So clearly, as a Ramunap Red player, he does not feel as if that's a matchup he's scared to face at all.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine any of these players in the top 8 don't have some level of comfort with the Teamer matchup. It's such a popular deck, right? They played 15 rounds of Swiss. We assume they've faced that matchup a few times, but you're right. Brandon has faced it in the later rounds. The toughest opponents. He's pushed through in order to get into the top 8 and now to get into the semifinals. On the other side of the bracket, we'll bring you updates as soon as we have them. You can see that 2-time world champion Shahar Shenhar locked right now in a battle with Stephen Bernat.
And he loves Teamer. He was in a situation where he was short on invites coming into this year and had to decide which Pro Tour am I going to use my silver invite on. He chose Pro Tour 1 in Albuquerque, played Teamer, took that to a 12-4 finish, got his invite to Bilbao.
Well,
now he's not only in the top 8, awash in Pro Tour invitations, but has just won his quarterfinal match, so he's in the semifinals here in Portland.
So Shahar 2-0 over Stephen Bernat. So you've got 2 of your semifinalists already locked in, Shahar Shenhar and Brandon Go. Another one will be the winner of this Game 3 between Christoffer Larsen and Michael Bernat. This has been an exciting tournament. I think we know that some people today this is a stale format. There's not a lot of innovation happening. I think that's just not true if you look around the room. Just missing a win in the last round of the Swiss was Corey Burkhart playing blue-white cycling. That's one of the more exciting decks that we saw.
And Tan Wen with his Esper Approach deck, a unique take on Esper Approach.
Tan Wen Esper Approach. I saw another player lose a win in who was playing with green-white aggro and some interesting card choices. So a number of decks, not just showing up, but we're talking about the last round of the tournament, playing for top 8. A couple of these decks made the top 8, including what you see on the left here, this 4-color energy deck that's something somewhat unique with no Long Tusk Cub and no Abrade.
No Bristling Hydra, no Confiscation Q, no Glorybringer. It's not the Teamer Energy that you've been seeing all weekend.
Right, so don't let the name fool you, 4-color energy. It's a Gonti deck, right? Three copies of that. It's a Vraska, between Vraska and Vraska's Contempt, there's 4 copies in the main deck. So this is a black deck for sure.
And everyone loves the Pummeler. The Pummeler is a deck that people really love to play and to watch.
No question. That's a scary deck to play against.
Oh my gosh.
So hopefully we get to see some of that.
Game 3 here, you have to favor the Ramunap red deck whenever it's on the play. Chris is going to really be hoping to have a lot of inexpensive, interactive cards in his hand, specifically Fatal Push and Harness Lightning. And again, we haven't seen that Vraska's Contempt that I predicted at the beginning, but I think especially when you're on the draw, it's exactly the kind of card that you need to play on turn 4 to catch up against some of Michael's better draws.
Well, does Michael have one of his better draws? He's chosen to keep, so perhaps. Chris taking a look. We can see a Servant, a Harness Lightning, at least a Botanical Sanctum. A Forest, perhaps.
Looks like a lot of land he had there. Too many land.
Okay, so not satisfied with that 7. Chris will mulligan and check out his 6.
And, Chris been dominating the tournament. Certainly, here all the way from Denmark to play the event. He's a player who's going to understand the Ramunap red strategy, and he is not going to just keep any 7-card hand with lands and spells. He knows he needs a specific early turn sequencing to be able to deal with some of the best Ramunap red hands. So
it looked like he had an opening hand that may have just been all he could do in the early turns was play a 2/2. He saw it. He said, that's not going to be enough. He'll try his luck with 6 and a scry. You mentioned that Christoffer is a pro, is from Denmark. He's a pro player from that region. He's on one of the super teams or one of the pro teams, Team Genesis.
And he's a strong guy too. He looks like he'll help you lift something up if you needed that. So
I think so.
Yeah.
Immediately keeps scries to the top. So he likes his 6 and he likes his scry. Michael Bernat, again, no 1-drop. His is not a red deck that's focused on 1-drops. This turn 2 ought to be important, though. So it's the same Kari Zev that we've seen all 3 games now for Michael Bernat. Christoffer Larsen has a 2-drop of his own, so it's not going to help with the immediate problem of Kari Zev, but it's he's on the board.
Yeah, Kari Zev is just so good against everything but removal. It's one of the cards that is weakest against Fatal Push. It gives your opponent an opportunity to deal with your early board presence without losing tempo, and in fact gaining a 1-man advantage. But against a 2-drop and a 3-drop, like a normal curve from an energy style deck, Kari Zev can sneak in so much early damage, and we've seen how those little early damage, those plinks, can add up quickly.
Well, it is the 1 copy of On-Crop Crasher that's in Michael Bernat's list. He's drawn it. Now he's got a decision. Do I exert, not allow my opponent to block, or do I just go ahead and offer this trade?
Yeah, the default here is to exert. The default is you get your damage in when you can with the Ramunap red deck, and you pressure your opponent's life total to maximize the efficiency of your Ramunap ruins and your burn spells in the later part of the game. This is a situation where Christoffer's already taken a mulligan. He did not play a removal spell on turn 2. He selected Servant of the Conduit, indicating that Servant might be a really important part of his game plan, and he could really need the mana. So there's some temptation, to not exert the On-Crop Crasher. Hard to say what to do. I think I would still end up exerting it. He chooses not to.
Yeah, it's an interesting decision point. The fact that Chris blocked makes it even more interesting, right? Because it changes the entire course of the game. Whirler Virtuoso is the turn 3 play for Chris. You can see why he was happy to trade. He didn't need the mana in order to make a powerful turn 3 play, and the On-Crop Crasher is not sitting there dealing 3 last turn and who knows what this turn. So makes sense. We see Michael untap now. He's got, I believe, a Chandra in his hand. We'll see if we see it this turn. So both players coming out strong, that's for sure. Sunscorched Desert dropping Chris to 16.
Yeah, Whirler Virtuoso, we've said it time and time again, it's just the critical card for these energy strategies against the red deck. Without it, it's very, very difficult to win. With it, he can create meaningful resistance and play kind of a strong long-term game. And Christoffer, I think, just motions at the monkey. I'm eating that monkey.
Immediately blocks it,
yeah.
as we saw last game.
Attention,
all right, here's 4 mana. There's Chandra, Torch of Defiance. Another reason Whirler Virtuoso is so powerful, matches up actually better than most cards in this spot.
Right. Yeah, Michael obligated to tick up the Chandra there. Of course, if he ticked the Chandra down on Whirler Virtuoso, Christoffer could just make a token and then finish Chandra with the one Thopter.
Chris making a token anyways, now has 3 power on the board.
Now this is the turn where he would love to, and he does have the Vraska's Contempt. We talked about it as a possibility on turn 4 in the pregame against some of Michael's better draws. He has the Vraska's Contempts, and Christoffer is right back in the game.
That's huge. Not only a clean 1-for-1 answer, even so clean as to clean up that 2 damage, right? I mean, just a perfect 4 mana for 4 mana exchange, tit for tat. Doesn't mean Christopher's way ahead, but it means he did not fall behind in that sequence. Okay, a Braid knocks out Whirler Virtuoso. With Chris out of energy, there's no Thopters that can block, and both Bernat Courier and Karizev can come in with her pet monkey. They missed the Exile Monkey trigger.
It's okay, it's a legend, so it's not a problem.
All right, so the judge assumes they want to add that back to the stack. That monkey's gone. All right, Deathgorge Scavenger, one of the powerful sideboard cards in this matchup, comes down for Chris, grabs 2 life on the way down, and at least for the moment, threatens to block Bernat Courier.
Yeah. Where is Deathgorge Scavenger bad? It's bad against Hazoret the Fervent. It's bad against Shelter Torch of Defiance. Where does it really shine? It shines in these kinds of close race situations where the ability to threaten gaining 2 life over and over again is really, really difficult for the Ramunap red deck. So Christoffer will be really happy to have that Deathgorge Scavenger out.
One of the things we talked about is, between a Raid and Shock, there's some cards that are sometimes effective against Chris and sometimes not. A Shock, for example, right here would certainly be effective. Lightning Strike a little bit less so, but still will get the job done. We'll see what Michael decides to use.
And that's just the difficulty in attacking this energy deck.
Instead, he's actually setting up Hazoret, not for this turn, but next. 2 cards in hand means Hazoret cannot attack this turn.
Yeah.
But will be very likely to be able to attack next turn.
Right.
There's Vraska.
There's Vraska. And this is such a huge turn for Christoffer. He can both get the Vraska down, plus it, make a blocker, and if he'd like to, he could attack with Deathgorge Scavenger and gain 2 more life. He chooses not to do that.
Wow, so that's big. Both Michael Bernat and Chris Larson playing one of their, mythic rares that they feel is a key part of their strategy. Hazoret for Michael, Vraska for Chris. You got to give a slight edge to Chris. His mythic costs 6. It creates blockers. But Michael, I think I saw a Glorybringer in his hand. If he can find a 5th mana, that makes things pretty interesting.
Right. Unlike last game, Michael has Christoffer under a little bit of life total pressure. He has a Bernat Courier with a card under it. He's got more cards in his hand, a Ramunap Ruins, a Scavenger Grounds, and notably, Christoffer doesn't have a follow-up Scarab God. So this game's not over.
There's a Sunscorched Desert. That's big. The 1 damage being redirected to Vraska. Vraska now on 7. Okay, so Michael's not gonna. He's not going anywhere just because of this Vraska. He's here to compete. There's Glorybringer.
Right.
Quite a curve from Michael.
Right. So we know that Glorybringer is going to attack and exert. It can either kill the Deathgorge Scavenger or the Thopter. We know that Hazoret's going to attack. and we have a pretty good idea that Karizev is going to attack. The question is, how much does he want to attack at Vraska? If he puts the maximum at Vraska, it's going to force some really bad blocks here from Christoffer. The Glorybringer alone puts Vraska down to 3, so Christoffer is going to be forced to put some combination of the Pirate and the Thopter in front of Hazaret, the Monkey, and Karizev, and none of those blocks are particularly attractive for Christoffer. So I think we might see Michael make an alpha strike at this Vraska.
Yeah, on the other hand, an alpha strike at the head also pretty scary. So we suspect that Glorybringer will be exerting, but there's not an obvious answer to this question of what to attack.
Yeah, the reason why I expect an attack at the Vraska is he's already a Sun-Scorched Desert targeting Christoffer, so indicating that, or sorry, excuse me, targeting the Vraska, so it indicated that during that inflection point, he's chosen to make Vraska an important part of this game.
All right, so Exert knocks out Deathgore Scavenger. Well, there's no. It looks like everything's attacking something. We don't know. We don't have the game audio to know whether it's Vraska or Chris, but we'll find out in a moment.
Here's why I kind of a simple method that I like to use for why I would like to attack Vraska. He's over-attacking Vraska here by quite a bit, right? So there's some temptation to say, why would you over-attack? He could just put Vraska in the graveyard. Well, look at the board if he just puts Vraska in the graveyard, right? Michael is just dominating the board with all these creatures. So an attack on Vraska forces blocks, whereas an attack on Christoffer doesn't necessarily force him into those same blocks. Okay, wow.
So everything is actually going at Christoffer. You still see a chump block on the Hazaret. And the other thing you see is that Chris falls to 6.
Yeah, so a pivot there in the same turn. Sun-Scorched Desert targeting your Vraska. He's changed his directions and goes at Christoffer. Seems like Michael maybe changed his mind in the middle of that turn.
Yeah, and the most important thing is that you land in a place that ultimately that you think is the right decision. I think knocking Chris to 6 looks pretty strong here.
Yeah, the issue with this play by allowing Chris to remain with a Vraska on 7 in play is that if Chris is able to find an answer to that Hazaret, he already has an answer to Glorybringer built in with the Vraska, and all of a sudden Michael's once very promising board could be down to virtually nothing and still dealing with that Vraska.
Yeah, certainly a tough decision like we talked about. Michael deciding, you know what, I'd rather that this game be shortened a little bit.
Sure.
That's what he's going to try to do. Christoffer, pulled that card at the top of his deck. No, come on, give me something, and it was a land.
Yeah, as always, probably the best draw for him, Vraska's Contempt. That's what he would have liked to see right there.
No question about that. 2 life, it could certainly be useful in getting rid of the Hazaret even more so. So instead it's serve another conduit, make a pirate with Vraska. So Vraska going up again. Since Glorybringer is exerted, you figure he'll have next turn to decide what to do about that Glorybringer. All right, Michael Bernat untaps. Got to be feeling pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully we don't see a Yamwing Chun intercombat with 2 cards in hand situation here.
I hope not. Michael taking his time. Yeah, look at the bind that Chris is in. He's got to hope that this is activate Hazaret, and it still sends you to 4, and that's maybe the best outcome. Instead, it's going to be Rampaging Ferocidon. Pretty good card against Vraska.
I think Hazaret's going to probably eat one of these pirates. And Michael obligated to play the Rampaging Ferocidon before combat, before Ragavan comes into play or something out of nature, because, again, we discussed earlier, he needs to get down to 1 card in hand for Hazaret.
Yeah, and at 17 life, yes, he'll take 1, but he's not too concerned. More concerned about what do these blocks look like, and should the Bomat Courier come in perhaps. Decides no on the Bomat Courier, but yes on the other 2. Here comes the Monkey.
Right, so what stands out to me as an obvious block would be to chump and then double block the Hazaret and then double block the Karizev. drop to 4.
So everything's going at Christoffer. The coverage team tells us. So again, the plan right now is ignore Vraska. Vraska can't ultimate. At 6 life, the damage is more valuable at the face. That makes sense.
But you know what he really wants to draw here? The Hour of Devastation that we talked about during sideboarding. Did he bring that in? Is it on top of Christoffer's deck? It might be the only thing that saves him right now.
Yeah. He's going to need something like that. It's a tune with Ether.
He draws the best card in Standard, but this is not the best time in Standard for it.
Alright, so he's got Glorybringer under control by minusing Vraska.
And you notice he says go with Attune with Ether in hand, the reason being that if you were to reveal the Attune with Ether, Michael would have trivially easy lethal attacks. In this case, he may still go for it.
Yeah, I suspect he's going to find it. Oh, Chandra. Torch of Defiance. A little bit of overkill here, but it'll certainly get the job done. Ramunap Red, a deck that does not go away quietly.
Ramunap Red, and we talked about it, big picture in this format. There would be the people that showed up with the teamer, people that showed up to beat the teamer, and people that showed up to beat the people that showed up to beat the teamer. And in this case, Christoffer had a deck that he had tuned, and he beat up on these teamer energy strategies all weekend, and Michael was hoping to play against people like Christoffer.
So it's scissors against paper, right? Here's all 3 creatures attacking. Because one of those creatures has menace, it would require 4 chump blockers to fully account for them. Chris with only 1 creature cannot stay alive. Well, he's going to make sure.
Yeah, just looking at that treasure. Is that a clue? Looking at the Vraskas, they're gonna do it. I mean, you're just searching. Can my lands change? Look at my graveyard, and it's not a bad habit.
Can I spend this 6 energy?
Is there anything I can do? You're looking at every zone of the game to look for anything that might give you an out before you finally concede. And unfortunately, it looks like.
Handshake. There it is. Not sure what they were talking about there. Got accused of slow rolling? I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
All right, so our semifinals taking shape here. Shahar Shenhar on one side of the bracket. Here you have Michael Bernat. Welcome back to the booth. I'm Matt Sperling. This is Paul Rietzel. We're going to bring you some more coverage of this top 8. We're heading into our semifinal. We've got, in one side of the bracket, a Ramunap Red mirror match. We're actually going to show you via live video coverage the other side of the bracket semifinal match. Shahar Shenhar versus, I'm not sure who the opponent will be, Stevenson. That's James Stevenson and from Canada. He'll be Shahar's opponent in the semifinal. So stay tuned. We're going to take a quick break while we set up that feature match, and we'll be back with more live coverage of Grand Prix Portland.